What happens when two iconic forces collide on live TV, and neither backs down? Today, we're diving headfirst into one of the most unforgettable moments in daytime television. The day Denzel Washington showed up on The View, and what was supposed to be a simple promotional interview turned into an intellectual firefight. This wasn't just a tense moment. It was a verbal showdown so sharp and raw, it left even Whoopi Goldberg momentarily stunned and had the audience glued to every single word. This wasn't PR fluff. This was a full-scale ideological clash that had everyone talking for weeks. But before we break it all down, don't forget to subscribe and drop your thoughts in the comments, especially if you believe celebrities should speak truth to power when the cameras are rolling. So here's how it started. It was a regular morning at The View's Manhattan studio. The crew was buzzing because they'd landed Denzel Washington, one of the most respected names in Hollywood, for a cozy little sit-down. The plan? Light chat, some inspiration, promote his latest directorial project. Easy win, or so they thought. From the moment Denzel walked on stage, you could feel it. Something was different. He wasn't cold, but he wasn't there to play the game either. He shook hands, smiled politely, but that focused, piercing gaze said it all. He didn't come for small talk. Whoopi Goldberg kicked things off with her trademark confidence. Denzel, welcome back. Your new film deals with justice and accountability. Do you think Hollywood has a duty to address social issues? Or should entertainment be just that? Entertainment? It seemed like a setup for a smooth, measured response. Instead, Washington leaned in, face serious, voice calm but razor-edged. That's exactly the wrong question, he said. The temperature in the room dropped. The real question is, why are we still debating whether truth belongs in our storytelling? Hollywood doesn't have a duty to address social issues. It has a duty to stop pretending neutrality isn't a choice. You could see the co-hosts glance at each other. They knew this wasn't going to be the usual morning fluff. But Whoopi wasn't rattled. She's been in the fire before. Well, she countered, that's a little unfair. There's been real progress. We've seen more diversity, more representation, more stories from perspectives that never had space before. Denzel didn't flinch. Progress according to who? He shot back. The same industry that for decades told us our stories didn't sell, that we weren't marketable? You know better, Whoopi. You've lived it. A PR campaign is not the same thing as structural change. Now it was getting serious. The studio fell into an intense silence. Whoopi leaned forward, clearly taken aback, but not retreating. I'm not talking about PR. I'm talking about real change. Opportunities that didn't exist when I was coming up. Are you saying none of that matters? I'm saying, Denzel replied, steady as ever, that calling it progress implies we're heading somewhere better. And I'm not sure. That's true. The faces may change, but the decision-makers rarely do. Our stories are told, sure, but who profits from them? Who holds the power behind the camera? That line landed hard. This wasn't a soundbite battle. This was a battle of philosophies. Whoopi came back strong. So what then? We ignore the progress? We act like nothing's changed? That sounds cynical. Cynical? Denzel raised an eyebrow. A half smile appeared, but it didn't soften the blow. There's nothing cynical about refusing to applaud scraps when we've been feeding the system for decades. Expecting excellence isn't pessimism, it's respect. Boom. Even the cameraman seemed to lean in. Whoopi's face tightened. She wasn't just reacting, she was feeling it now. Scraps? She said, voice rising. I think that's incredibly dismissive. I came up in this industry when there were no opportunities. The fact that you and I are sitting here today with power, with platforms, that is not scraps. Denzel leaned back, unbothered. No one's dismissing what you've built or what I've built. What I'm asking is, did we break barriers? For everyone, or just for ourselves? That line hung heavy in the air. Even Whoopi paused. She wasn't just in a sparring match. She was in a master class. You know what? That's a fair point, she admitted. But look, change takes time. You can't fix generations of exclusion overnight. The fact that we're even having this conversation on national TV, that is something. Denzel nodded slowly, eyes still sharp. True, it's something, but it's not enough. And that's the danger, getting comfortable with something instead of pushing for everything. If we celebrate too early, we forget how far there still is to go. The tension hadn't eased. It had just evolved. So Whoopi pressed further. All right then, what's your solution? What does real change look like to you? Now Denzel came alive. Real change means decision-making power that reflects the audience, not just the cast. It means greenlighting stories because they're true, not because they're trending. It means ownership, shared profits, communities telling their own stories and benefiting from them. Now the room was really listening. This wasn't idealism. These were policies, clear, bold, radical, real. Whoopi seemed impressed, but she wasn't letting go. Those are powerful ideas, but also massive. You're talking about reimagining the whole industry. How realistic is that? Denzel smiled, this time with warmth behind it. Whoopi, 20 years ago, this conversation would have been unthinkable. 50 years ago, neither of us would have had a seat at this table. Change only seems unrealistic if we believe those in power will give it up willingly. They won't. That moment hit like thunder. Denzel wasn't just calling out Hollywood, he was naming a truth that transcended entertainment. And Whoopi got it. So what you're saying, she clarified, is that real change doesn't come from polite conversation. It comes from confrontation, from pressure. Exactly, Denzel said, because the people who benefit from inequality won't fix it out of the goodness of their hearts. They'll fix it when we make it impossible not to. And just like that, one of the most profound debates in daytime history had played out in real time. This wasn't a feud. This was two giants confronting uncomfortable truths and letting the audience bear witness. Now it's your turn. Was Denzel too harsh? Or was he just the truth the industry needed to hear? Drop your thoughts below, hit that like button, and subscribe for more stories that go deeper than the headlines. But surely there's value in building bridges, finding common ground with people who might not see things your way. Washington shifted his focus to another co-host, delivering his point with the same quiet intensity he'd aimed at Whoopi. Of course there's value in building bridges, but you can't build a bridge to someone who refuses to meet you halfway. And you can't find common ground with people who benefit from the status quo, unless you're honest that their interests may not align with yours. Whoopi jumped in again, clearly trying to steer the conversation back on track. But that sounds like you're promoting an adversarial stance. Don't you think some people in power genuinely want to do the right thing? That they want to help create positive change? Washington didn't flinch. I'm sure some do. And I'll gladly work with anyone who proves that, through action, not just speeches. But I'm not in the business of convincing people to care about justice. If they don't already, I doubt anything I say will flip the switch. That moment cracked open the real difference in their worldviews. Whoopi seemed to believe change comes from conversation and persuasion. Washington? He wasn't so sure. Those in power were ever willing to give it up voluntarily. This wasn't just a Hollywood debate. It was a clash of philosophies. So, where does that leave us? Whoopi asked. If you don't think minds can be changed through dialogue, what's the point of conversations like this? Washington's answer took the air out of the room. The point isn't to sway the powerful, it's to reach the people watching, those who might feel empowered to demand better. It's about showing what it means to speak truth to power. Even when it's uncomfortable. You could see Whoopi's expression shift. The dynamic flipped. This wasn't about winning a TV debate anymore. It was a live masterclass in communication. The audience leaned in, suddenly aware they weren't just observers. They were the real target of Washington's message. frustrated but clearly impressed. Whoopi said, "So this whole time you've been performing for the audience instead of really engaging with us. Isn't that a little manipulative?" Washington let out his first real laugh of the interview. It was warm, light, a pressure release. "Whoopi, every televised interview is for the audience. The difference is, I'm just being honest about it. When you toss softball questions about my films, you're serving an audience that wants comfort. When I challenge those questions, I'm reaching out to the folks who want to think more critically." It was a moment of raw honesty. Even Whoopi looked disarmed, half annoyed, half admiring the candor. But she pushed again. "There's a difference between being strategic and being calculated, between encouraging critical thinking and preaching to people." Washington didn't hesitate. "You're right. That's why I don't tell people what to believe. I share my take and trust the audience to figure out if it connects with their reality. People are smarter than we give them credit for." That threw Whoopi off. She'd been bracing for a fight, not for him to agree with her and then flip. The frame. It was a deft rhetorical move, subtle but sharp. And it worked. "All right," Whoopi said, leaning in now. "Let me ask you this directly. You've called out the industry, questioned real progress, said power won't give itself up. But you're still part of that machine, still making studio films, still working within the very system you criticize. How do you square that?" The room fell silent. Washington paused. Clearly, this wasn't a question he was hearing for the first time. "That's the most important thing you've asked all day," he said, voice low, steady. "And you're right. It cuts to the core of how we create. Change inside flawed systems. I stay in the industry because that's where I can make the most impact. I use the resources and access I've earned to tell stories that wouldn't otherwise be told. To create space for people who haven't had it." He stopped again, then added, "But I'm honest about the limits of that approach. I'm not under any illusion that I alone can fix Hollywood. What I can do is use whatever platform I've got to push for more, to not settle, and to stay honest about how far we still have to go." It wasn't defensive. It wasn't rigid. It was thoughtful, nuanced. Whoopi looked genuinely surprised. Maybe she expected him to double down or dodge. Instead, he met the contradiction head-on. "That's a more complex answer than I expected," she admitted. "But it brings up something else. How do you hold on to your integrity while still being part of a system you don't fully believe in?" Washington offered a slight smile. "You ask yourself the hard questions, and you keep people around who will ask even harder ones. You stay honest about why you're doing what you're doing, whether that reason is noble or selfish. And you accept that there's no perfect path. Every choice comes with trade-offs." At this point, the tone had shifted. It wasn't confrontation, it was recognition. Two people who'd wrestled with the same questions, even if they chose different paths. The audience could feel it. A rare moment of actual depth on television. "You know what?" Whoopi said, voice softening. "I think we agree on more than we disagree. We both want real change. We both want more opportunity for people who've been excluded. We both want to use our platforms to make a difference. Maybe we're just arguing about strategy." Washington nodded. "Maybe. But strategy matters. It decides what we'll settle for and what we'll fight for. Whether we applaud slow change or demand something bigger. So you don't think incremental progress is worth celebrating?" she asked. "I think it's worth acknowledging," he said carefully. "But celebrating it too much? That can make us stop pushing. There's a difference between being proud of how far we've come and thinking that's far enough." It was a subtle but powerful distinction, and it captured the heart of their disagreement. Whoopi seemed to reflect on that, not conceding, but clearly rethinking. As the segment wrapped, both of them knew something rare had just happened. A real conversation, not sound bites, not fluff, real thought, real disagreement, real respect. "Denzel Washington, everybody," Whoopi said with a sigh and a smile. That was a much deeper conversation than I thought we were going to have today. Washington smiled back. Thanks for being willing to have it. And just like that, one of the most powerful interviews in daytime TV came to a close. But what do you think? Was Denzel right about working inside the system while pushing for change? Or do you side more with Whoopi's approach, celebrating progress and keeping the dialogue going? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more breakdowns of the moments that shook the room.